Mafia boss refused to drive his wife home after the fight. The next morning, she was gone forever. The yelling shook the entire mansion as he told her he wasn't driving her home. He refused to look at her, refused to hear her, refused to budge. And she stood there humiliated, tears burning down her face, knowing the man who vowed to protect her was now leaving her stranded after the worst fight of their marriage. The next morning, she was gone forever. No note, no warning, nothing but the echo of the door that had closed behind her. Before we go deeper into this madness, tell me where you're watching from, what time it is in your city, smash that subscribe button, and get ready because this story is about to punch you straight in the chest. She had walked through the door alone the night before, shaking so badly she could barely hold her keys. She didn't even know how she made it back to the mansion by herself. Her hands still trembled from the argument, from the look he gave her, from the coldness she had never seen in him before. She replayed his words again and again, each one stabbing through her ribs like he'd reached inside her chest and carved out something she didn't know she still had left. He always fought hard, always spoke loud, always dominated every space he entered, but he had never done this. Never left her in the middle of nowhere. Never made her feel disposable. Never made her feel insignificant enough to abandon. She paced the hallway after coming home, heart pounding as if trying to escape her body. She expected him to walk in behind her, to cool down, to say something, anything. Apology, explanation, even anger would have been better than silence. But silence was all she got. Hours passed like ghosts drifting through the house. She stared at the door until dawn. Nothing. No car in the driveway. No footsteps. No shadow of her husband returning. Something inside her cracked open like a fault line, splitting the earth. When the sun finally bled through the curtains, she felt something shift inside her. Not weakness. Not more tears. Something harder. Something colder. Something final. She packed a single bag. Only the essentials. Only the items that meant something to her. Not the gift he showered her with whenever he screwed up. Not the expensive dresses he used to soften his arrogance. Not the sparkling distractions he threw at her to silence her pain. She took the things she owned before she met him, before his world swallowed her whole and turned her into someone she barely recognized. A photo, a necklace, a small journal, clothing she could move in, not suffocate in. She grabbed the bag, walked through the mansion she thought she would grow old in, and realized how suffocating it had become. It wasn't a home. It was a cage lined with gold. A beautiful, glittering trap. She slipped out as quietly as she once slipped into his shadow. She left. She disappeared. Meanwhile, he crashed through the mansion doors an hour later, slamming them so hard the walls trembled. He was still angry, still full of that fire that blinded him. He expected her waiting, ready to resume the argument, ready to snap back at him as always. But the house was silent. Too silent. Her shoes were missing. Her scent barely lingered. A single glass sat on the counter, half drunk, abandoned. His name was not called. No footsteps rushed to meet him. No voice demanding answers. His chest tightened. He shouted her name, storming through the halls as if the walls were mocking him. Nothing. His voice bounced back at him like the house itself was empty of breath. He went upstairs. The bed was made. Her pillow was cold. Her side was untouched. He checked the closet, clothes still there, but something was missing. The bag. The bag he bought her when they traveled to Milan. His stomach dropped hard. He called her phone. Off. He called again. Straight to voicemail. He listened to her recorded message, repeating her voice over and over until his throat closed. He slammed the phone on the counter, grabbed his keys, and drove like a possessed man through every part of the city she loved. Cafes, parks, streets, shops, every place she once smiled at, every place they once held hands. Nothing. Hours passed. Anger faded into dread, dread into panic, panic into something he had never felt before. Fear. Real fear. The kind that wraps around your spine and drags you into darkness. Then came the worst part, the realization that this wasn't just a tantrum or temporary anger. She was gone with purpose, gone with intention, gone with pain deep enough to silence her completely. She didn't want to be found. He returned home, fists bruised from punching the dashboard, heart pounding so violently he thought it might collapse in on itself. He didn't want to admit what his mind was screaming. He drove the woman he loved away. He left her alone when she needed him most. He became the monster she swore she would never let into her life. But he wasn't ready to lose her. He tore through every inch of the house searching for something. Anything she left behind. A note, a clue, a message. Something that said she still loved him, still wanted him, still cared. But nothing. Only emptiness. Only the weight of his own actions pressing down on him like a verdict. He went to the security room, pulled up the mansion cameras. There she was, walking out with that small bag in her hand. Her shoulders low, her head down, her steps fragile but determined. He watched the moment she walked out of the gates. He watched the moment she didn't look back. He watched the moment he lost her. His breath shook, his chest constricted, his heart shattered. He grabbed his coat, weapons, phone, and stormed out again, but this time with desperation that burned hotter than any rage he ever carried. He didn't care who stood in his way, friends, rivals, his own men. He would tear entire cities apart if he had to. He would threaten, bribe, destroy until he found her. She wasn't just his wife. She was the only person who loved the man behind the power, the only person who held his soul with trembling hands and treated it gently. And he threw her away like she meant nothing. He started with the only place she might have gone first, the home she grew up in. A small, quiet place she rarely visited because it held more pain than comfort. He drove there with sirens screeching in his blood. When he arrived, the door was partially open. Lights off. Silence too heavy to be normal. He stepped inside, calling her name. Nothing. But something felt off. Too off. He found a single piece of paper on the table. Not a note from her. A message from someone else. Someone who had been watching her. Waiting. Someone who knew exactly how fragile she was after last night's fight. Someone who struck the moment she walked out the door. He read the message. His blood turned to ice. She wasn't missing. She was taken. And he was the reason why. His fingers crushed the paper as the truth detonated in his chest. She hadn't walked away from him by choice. She hadn't disappeared to heal. She hadn't escaped the pain he caused. Someone took her. Someone waited for the exact moment she stepped out alone. Someone watched their marriage crumble and seized the opportunity like a predator pouncing on wounded prey. His vision blurred with a rage so violent it felt radioactive. His pulse was a hammer in his ears. His heart spun between guilt, terror, and wrath, all fused into one explosive force. He stared at the message again, each word carving deeper into his spine. They had her, and they wanted him to know. They wanted him to feel powerless. They wanted him broken before they even made their next move. He stormed through the house, ripping open drawers, checking corners, scanning for cameras or signs of forced entry. Every instinct screamed that he was already too late, that she had been taken hours before he even woke up to find her gone. He smashed his fist into the wall, splintering the wood, breathing like an animal trapped in a burning cage. He had enemies. Plenty. Rivals he crushed. Families he dismantled. Men he ruined. But none dared touch his wife. Until now. Someone crossed a line no one had ever been reckless enough to approach. He grabbed his phone and called his men, commanding them to lock the city down, to seal every exit, to trace every camera between his mansion and her childhood home. His orders spilled out like bullets, each sharper than the last. They scrambled, terrified of the fury in his voice. Even they had never heard him like this. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a man on the verge of burning the world to retrieve the only person who ever melted his armor. He stepped outside and punched open the car door, slamming into the seat, driving so fast the road blurred under him. His thoughts spiraled, snapping between memories of her smile, her soft voice, the way she touched him when she wanted to calm his storms. The storms he never deserved to have calmed. Now he had created the storm that swallowed her. He reached his headquarters in minutes, storming inside as his men flew out of his way. They said nothing. They knew the scent of death when it walked into a room. He slammed the message on the table and demanded everything they knew. They combed through footage, analyzing routes, marking unusual vehicles, tracking suspicious movements. Hours of searching condensed into minutes through panic-fueled desperation. Then one of them froze. A grainy clip, a van slowing behind her childhood home not long after she entered. A man stepping out masked. He slipped inside. For minutes later, he carried her out over his shoulder, unconscious, possibly drugged. The van drove off, disappearing into traffic like a ghost. His heart collapsed inward. Seeing her limp in someone's arms ignited a fury that didn't feel human. He grabbed the nearest chair and smashed it across the floor. His men flinched. He didn't care. He would tear the earth open. He would flip cities upside down. He would cut down every enemy he ever made until he found the one who touched her, until he destroyed them piece by trembling piece. His voice cracked as he demanded more footage, more angles, more leads. Then a second clip surfaced. The same van, heading toward the old industrial district, a place ruled by men who hated him enough to scorch heaven just to make him bleed. He bolted out of the room, ignoring his men calling after him. They tried to follow. He didn't wait. He didn't breathe. He drove like a demon unleashed, visions of her calling his name ripping through him. Every red light became a target. Every second wasted felt like betrayal. He spoke her name aloud, almost pleading with the universe not to take her from him. He wasn't done fighting for her. He wasn't done becoming a better man for her. He wasn't done loving her. He'd barely begun. He reached the industrial district, the air thick with dust and tension. He pulled his gun from the glove box and stepped out, every muscle strung tight. The streets were too quiet, buildings abandoned, windows broken, a perfect place to hide someone, a perfect place to torture someone, a perfect place to leave a message carved in blood. He walked forward, scanning every shadow, listening for any sound. Then he saw Skid march from the van. Fresh, they led to a warehouse. The lights flickered inside. His breath stilled. He stepped closer, gripping his gun harder, pushing the door open with the barrel. The moment he stepped in, he knew. He heard muffled sobbing. Her. His entire soul snapped toward the sound. But as he sprinted down the hallway, a figure lunged out of nowhere, swinging a metal pipe at his head. He caught it just in time, twisted, and slammed the man against the wall. The man choked out a warning, but he didn't care. He knocked him out cold, stepping over his body without a second thought. Every sound of her crying was a magnet, dragging him deeper into the building. He shoved open the next door and froze. She was tied to a chair, bruised, terrified, her face streaked with tears. When she saw him, her scream died in her throat. Relief and fear collided in her eyes. He moved toward her, but a gun clicked behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't breathe. He didn't need to see the man to know who it was. A rival he thought he crushed years ago. A man who crawled from the ashes of defeat with only one purpose, to destroy him piece by piece. The rival laughed, taunting him, telling him she begged for him, calling her weak, calling him blind, calling their entire marriage a weapon. The rage boiling inside him became nuclear. His grip tightened on the gun. His heartbeat slowed. He listened to every detail, every insult, every word meant to fracture him. Then the rival made a fatal mistake. He touched her face. Luca moved so fast the air split. He twisted around, firing before the rival even realized what happened. The man fell. Silence swallowed the room. Luca rushed to her, ripping the ropes off her wrists, pulling her into his chest. She shook violently, clutching him like he was the last thing anchoring her to the world. He held her like he wanted to fuse her into his bones. His breath broke. His voice trembled as he whispered apologies against her hair. She cried, asking why he didn't come home last night. He swallowed the guilt, knowing he put her in the exact position this monster exploited. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her out of the building while his men arrived and cleared the area. He placed her in the car gently, like she might break if he touched her too hard. The ride home was silent but charged, every breath filled with the weight of what almost happened. When they reached the mansion, she wouldn't let go of his shirt. Her fingers curled in the fabric, refusing to release him. He carried her inside and sat with her on the bed, refusing to step away even for a second. She asked if he still loved her. His chest cracked open. He told her he never stopped. He told her he almost lost his mind when she disappeared. He told her the fight meant nothing. She meant everything. She cried into him again. He held her until the shaking stopped. But as she clung to him, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't over. Someone helped his rival. Someone opened the door. Someone knew exactly when she'd walk out alone. And he would find them. Luca didn't sleep that night. He didn't even blink. He sat on the edge of the bed with his elbows braced on his knees, his jaw locked so tight it ached, watching her breathe just to make sure she was still there. Every inhale she took was a reminder that he almost lost her. Every exhale was a warning that someone wasn't done trying. When the sun finally crawled up the sky, he stood, grabbed his gun, and walked out with a storm following behind him. His men were already lined up downstairs, silent, tense, waiting for orders. They could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't their boss anymore. This was something darker, colder, ancient. A man who'd tasted the edge of grief and rejected it with violence. He told them one thing. They weren't looking for a rival anymore. They were searching for a traitor. Someone planted inside his own world. Someone who knew his wife's routines. Someone familiar enough to predict when she would storm out of the car and walk toward her childhood home alone. Someone who had been close enough to her to anticipate a moment of weakness. He demanded the full list of staff, associates, drivers, cleaners, cooks, guards. He wanted schedules, calls, messages, movements. He wanted every detail torn apart and examined until the truth surfaced. They scrambled, terrified. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of his rage. No one wanted to be the reason his wife nearly died. He grabbed the files himself, flipping through pages so fast they shredded under his fingers. He scanned faces and names, looking for the one who didn't belong. And then a pattern appeared. Her driver. Not the one he assigned, no. That one had called in sick the night before. A replacement had been sent. A man who'd worked only 6 months. Quiet. Calculated. Too polite. Too invisible. The kind of person who blends into the walls until he decides to move. Luca felt his pulse throb behind his eyes. They had found their opening. They had found the leak. He barked for the car, storming out with 3 men at his back. They tracked the driver's address, an apartment too expensive for someone on that salary, paid in cash, no security footage at the entrance. The kind of place someone hides secrets inside. Luca kicked the door open before the others had even aimed their weapons. The apartment was empty. Too empty. No clothes. No personal items. No signs anyone ever planned to return. But on the kitchen counter a phone, still plugged in, still warm, as if someone left in a hurry. He grabbed it, scrolling through the messages, and found one that made his blood boil. A simple text, 1 minute after his wife walked out alone. It read now. Someone gave the order. Someone pulled the trigger on her kidnapping. Someone who thought Luca wouldn't burn them alive for it. He turned to his men, voice low, deadly, vibrating. They traced the number, bouncing through VPNs and proxies, but eventually the chain broke. All leads pointed to one place. An underground gambling den run by a man Luca once let live out of mercy. A mercy that had now come back to slap him across the face. He got back in the car, fury radiating from him like heat. His men followed silently. No one dared speak. No one wanted to interrupt the violence forming inside his skull. When he reached the gambling den, he didn't wait. He kicked down the door, storming through clouds of cigarette smoke and chaos. Gamblers froze at the sight of him. Dealers backed away. Guards drew their guns, too slow. Luca shot the first 2 before they even understood the war they had walked into. Panic exploded. He grabbed one man by the collar, slamming him into a poker table so hard chips and cards flew across the room. He demanded answers. Who hired the driver? Who sent the message? Who ordered the kidnapping? Each question punctuated by another slam, another threat, another reminder that Luca Vassi never asked nicely twice. Finally, the man broke. He whispered a name Luca didn't expect, a name from inside his own organization, a man who'd served him for 10 years, a man he trusted with secrets, a man who smiled in his face and bowed at his feet, a man who dined in his home, a man who had once tried to flirt with his wife before Luca shut it down with a glare. A man who clearly never let go of that bitterness. Marco. The same Marco who disappeared 2 months earlier, claiming his father was sick and needed him. The same Marco who didn't return calls. The same Marco who suddenly resurfaced in whispers across the city as someone building alliances. Someone smart. Someone patient. Someone who waited until Luca and his wife were vulnerable from a fight. Someone who wanted revenge. Not for power, but for her. Luca's vision blurred again, rage flooding so deep his chest physically ached. He threw the man aside and walked out, his men following fast. He got in the car and demanded every safe house Marco had ever used, every address he ever hid in, every property under false names. They found one, an abandoned villa at the edge of the city. He drove there himself. No hesitation, no fear, no doubt. When he arrived, the gates were open. Too open. An invitation. A provocation. He stepped inside, gun drawn, muscles tight, senses sharp. The villa felt wrong. Quiet. Empty. But not empty. A note sat on the dining table. A note with his wife's name on it. He grabbed it, unfolding it with trembling fingers. If you want her, meet me at midnight. Come alone. He crushed the paper. The clock read 11:17. 43 minutes to kill someone. He left instantly, adrenaline surging so violently he nearly blacked out from the speed of it. He reached the location, a dock by the river, cold, silent, abandoned. Shadows stretched across the water. He stepped forward, scanning every angle. Then he heard footsteps. Slow, mocking, confident. Marco walked out from behind a cargo container, smirking, hands behind his back like he was presenting himself for a crown rather than a funeral. He taunted Luca, told him how easy it was to manipulate the fight between him and his wife, told him how predictable she was, told him how she trusted too easily, told him how she begged, told him how she cried. Luca's heart hammered, his rage building like pressure in a sealed tank. Marco said she deserved someone better, someone who would protect her, someone who would worship her, someone who wasn't a monster in a tailored suit. Luca stepped closer. Marco didn't flinch. He bragged about hiring the driver. He bragged about paying the rival. He bragged about setting the trap. Then he said the one thing he shouldn't have. He said he touched her. Luca didn't hear anything after that. The world went silent. He lifted his gun. Marco tried to run. He didn't get far. One shot. Through the chest. Marco collapsed. Luca didn't blink as he walked over, grabbed him by the collar, and whispered that touching his wife was the last mistake he'd ever make. Marco choked, tried to laugh, tried to breathe, and died with the truth burning in Luca's eyes. But as his body hit the ground, a phone rang in Marco's pocket. Luca answered it. A woman's voice spoke. If you think that was the only one involved, you're not ready. His blood froze, because that voice was his wife's sister. She didn't even feel her legs hit the ground at first. All she knew was the pressure of his arm yanking her backwards, the burn of panic exploding in her chest, and the sound of her own breathing turning into something wild and uncontrolled. The alley behind the club was darker than she expected, but the fear inside her was bright enough to blind everything else. She tried to twist away, tried to scream, tried to plant her feet, but his grip was like metal tightening around her spine. He kept walking, dragging her with him, not even looking back, not slowing down, not giving her a single second to decide if she should fight or freeze. She could feel people inside the club laughing and dancing, completely unaware that just a few meters away, her nightmare had finally caught up with her. Her pulse hammered, too loud, too fast, as she felt the cold slam of the car against her back. He pinned her there with one arm, eyes blazing with something she couldn't decode. Not rage, not calmness, something scarier, something controlled, something that meant he had already made decisions in his mind, and none of them were good for her. She whispered a shaky question, and the way he looked at her made the world shrink. His voice cut through the silence, low and lethal, telling her she had pushed him too far, that disappearing wasn't an option, that running only made him dig deeper, chase harder, burn hotter. He said she knew exactly who he was, exactly what he could do, and exactly what would happen to anyone who got between them. especially men who touched what wasn't theirs. She tried to deny it, tried to push back, but the moment she said the man's name, the Mafia boss's eyes changed. Something snapped, sharp and invisible, and she felt it slice straight through her. She tried to tell him she wasn't with the guy, that she didn't even know him, but he didn't care. He only cared that another man had gotten close. Another man had given her attention. Another man had seen her in a moment she didn't want to be seen. And that tiny detail, that small accidental piece of her night, was enough to pull a darkness out of him she had hoped she'd never witness again. When he finally let her breathe, it wasn't mercy, it was calculation. He opened the car door with one hand, still holding her with the other, and shoved her inside like she was something too fragile to trust but too important to lose. She shoved at his arm, but he didn't even react. He simply slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and the car roared to life with the same violence sitting inside his chest. The drive felt like an attack on her senses. Every turn was too sharp. Every acceleration too sudden. Every time he looked at her from the corner of his eye, heat shot through her ribs, not the good kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that warned her he was hurt, angry, and barely holding the pieces of himself together. She swallowed hard and forced herself to speak, to at least understand what came next. He told her everything in a voice too calm for how furious he felt. He said the man from the club wasn't just flirting. He wasn't just harmless. He was connected. He had ties to people who had been watching him for months. People who wanted leverage. People who waited for cracks. People who fed on fear. And she, without knowing it, had stepped right into the middle of it. Her stomach dropped so hard she felt sick. Her hands shook against her knees as she realized the truth. He wasn't dragging her away because he wanted control. He was dragging her away because she had almost been used as bait. She tried to tell him she didn't know, that she didn't understand the danger, but he cut her off with one sentence that shut her entire body down. He said the guys weren't looking for her. They were looking for him, and if they couldn't get to him, they would settle for the thing he cared about the most. Her throat tightened so painfully she could barely breathe. The thing he cared about the most. He didn't even say it gently. He didn't hesitate. He didn't correct himself. It was truth, not softness. Truth that hit her like a punch. She asked where he was taking her, and he stared straight ahead with hands gripping the wheel like he wanted to break it in half. He said he was taking her somewhere no one could touch her, somewhere he trusted, somewhere he could watch her until he figured out who exactly had been bold enough to make a move on his territory. She told him she didn't want to be locked away, didn't want to hide, didn't want to be trapped again, but he told her the alternative was worse. Much worse. She felt heat sting behind her eyes, frustration mixing with fear until it twisted into something sharp. She hated that he always acted like she needed saving. She hated that he could ruin her plans without even raising his voice. She hated that her body reacted to him even when her mind screamed to pull away. But above all, she hated that a tiny part of her felt safer next to him than anywhere else. When he finally stopped the car, her chest tightened again. They weren't at his house. They weren't at her place. They weren't anywhere familiar. This was a safe house, hidden, quiet, empty, too empty. He unlocked the door and motioned for her to enter. She hesitated, but one look at his face told her she didn't have the luxury of choosing. Inside, the room felt cold, like it didn't belong to either of them. She paced, overwhelmed, furious, confused. She demanded to know how long they would be here. He told her it depended on how fast he could find the men who had approached her. His voice dropped lower, darker, hotter, as he said he planned to deal with them personally. She felt a chill run down her spine at the certainty in his tone. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't threatening. He was promising. She tried to argue, tried to reason, but he stepped closer, closing the distance until she felt the air thicken between them like something combustible. She could feel his breath on her jaw. She could feel the tension vibrating off him. He told her she had scared him tonight. He told her the moment he saw the man leaning toward her at the bar, his mind went blank. He told her that losing her was not an option he would ever allow the world to consider. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to break free from her chest. She tried to calm him, but the moment she touched his arm, everything changed. His restraint cracked. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked onto hers with a heat that stole her next breath. She pulled her hand away, but his fingers caught her wrist, gentle yet unbreakable. That was the moment she realized he wasn't just protecting her from the outside world. He was protecting her from the parts of himself that were too violent, too obsessive, too consuming. Parts that only surfaced when she was too close. Her breath trembled. His did too. And then, unexpectedly, he turned away, forcing space between them. His voice was rough when he told her to get some rest. He said he wouldn't be far. He said she was safe here. But the way he walked toward the door, the way he lingered there for a second too long, the way his shoulders stiffened before he stepped out, she felt the truth ripple through her. He wasn't stepping out to give her peace. He was stepping out because being near her was becoming dangerous for both of them. But she didn't know what waited outside that door. She didn't know who had followed her earlier. She didn't know someone had already found the safe house. And she didn't know that tonight. Everything was about to explode. He'd barely made it 3 steps down the hallway before he felt it. An instinct so sharp it sliced through his spine. That awful silence. That wrong stillness. That shift in the air predators make when they're already inside the walls. He pulled the gun from his waistband a second before the light in the hallway flickered. He froze, listening. 1 breath. 2. Then he heard it. A scrape, soft enough to be innocent, but carrying the weight of someone trying not to be heard. His blood iced. They had found the safe house. He spun back toward her door, but before he could reach it, the first shot ripped through the hallway, exploding into the wall inches from his head. She screamed inside the room, just once, but that one scream detonated something inside him more powerful than anger, more violent than fear. He moved with a speed that didn't feel human, smashing through her door just as another shadow lunged for her in the dark. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He didn't breathe. He fired point blank, the gunshot shaking the room, the man collapsing at her feet before he could touch her. She fell backward, heart pounding so loud he could hear it over the ringing in his ears. Before she could run to him, another shot blasted through the window, sending glass raining over them. He grabbed her, yanked her behind the overturned table, shielding her with his body as bullets tore through the furniture. She begged him to stop, to run, to leave her and save himself, but he growled that he would die before he ever left her behind. Another bullet grazed his arm. He didn't flinch. His eyes burned with something primal as he peeked over the table and fired back through the shattered window. One man dropped. Another scrambled. And then there was silence. But not safety. He dragged her toward the back exit, blood running down his arm. But his grip on her was still strong, still certain, still claiming. She tried to tell him he was hurt, but he shook his head as if pain was an inconvenience he didn't have time for. They reached the alley, and for a moment, the world narrowed to their breaths. Then headlights flashed. A car screeched in, and the man from the club stepped out, smiling like he already believed he had won. She froze. The Mafia boss stepped in front of her. The man taunted him, laughing, saying she should have picked someone safer, someone smarter, someone who wouldn't drag her into hell. The boss didn't respond. He didn't blink. He only stared, jaw tightening until it trembled with suppressed fury. The man lifted his gun. She screamed his name, and the Mafia boss moved faster than she had ever seen him move. He shoved her behind an old dumpster, taking the shot meant for her, the bullet tearing into his side. Her world shattered. Her body went numb. She watched him fall to one knee, blood pouring between his fingers, but he still lifted his gun with steady, unshaking hands. The next shots came like thunder, final, decisive, merciless. One bullet dropped the man instantly. Another one silenced the driver, trying to run. A third one made sure no one else would ever touch her again. Silence sat heavy in the alley, thick with smoke and adrenaline. He swayed, collapsed, hit the ground with a softness that broke her heart more than any violence could. She ran to him, dropping beside him, pressing her hands over the wound, begging him not to go. He whispered that he wasn't dying. He still had promises to keep. He still had things he needed to fix. He still had her. Her tears burned as they fell onto his shirt. His eyes softened, something warm flickering through the agony. He lifted one shaking hand to touch her face, brushing her cheek like she was something fragile, something holy, something he had never deserved but still fought like hell to protect. He told her he didn't regret a single thing except letting her walk away that night. She broke every wall she'd built, every fear she'd hidden, every lie she'd told herself. It all cracked open under the weight of what he had just done, what he was willing to sacrifice, what she meant to him. Sirens wailed in the distance. She begged him to stand. He tried. His body almost gave out. But he forced himself upright because he refused to let anyone see him broken in front of her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, leaning on her slightly, but pretending he wasn't. She held him tighter anyway. When backup arrived, his men, loyal and vicious, they froze at the sight of him bleeding. They moved quickly, securing the perimeter, removing bodies, clearing evidence. They offered to lift him, but he refused, muttering that he wasn't weak, that she didn't need to see him carried. His men shared one look and understood. They cleaned the alley. They handled the consequences. They delivered justice in the shadows the same way he always had, quietly, efficiently, with brutal finality. Hours later, she sat beside him on a couch in another, safer location while his wound was stitched. He kept his eyes on her the entire time, as if making sure she didn't disappear again. When the medic left, he finally let out a breath and leaned back, exhausted, hurting but alive. She reached for his hand. He stared at their intertwined fingers like it was something he never expected to have again. Something he almost died for without hesitation. Something he didn't know how to protect without destroying half the city. She whispered that she wasn't running anymore. His eyes closed for a long moment, like the world finally loosened its grip around his throat. When he opened them again, there was no rage, no fire, no violence. Only relief, only truth, only her. He whispered that if she stayed, he would rebuild everything from the ground up. No secrets, no shadows, no chains, just them. For the first time since the night they met. She believed him. But neither of them knew the war he just ended would wake an enemy far more dangerous. And their story was nowhere near finished. Their battle in that alley changed everything. Blood spilled, truths surfaced, and loyalties revealed themselves in ways no one expected. He faced death to protect her, and she faced her fears to stay beside him. But peace never lasts long in a world built on power, danger, and forbidden love. Sometimes the people we fear the most are the ones willing to bleed for us. Love becomes dangerous when it demands courage instead of comfort, sacrifice instead of safety, truth instead of escape. Subscribe for the next explosive chapter. Comment where you're watching from. Share this story with someone who loves danger and romance. The next story will shock you.